Hi, this is Dan Heisman, and we're here to help you improve your chess game with a series of YouTube videos. Some of my most popular YouTube videos are the ones that talk about thought process. I think you could learn a lot from watching the games where I play out loud against the engines. Those are thought process, my 20-minute videos. We have a lot of videos on analysis and thought process, but today we're going to talk about a particular types of thought process errors. And they're related. The two that we're going to talk about, one of them I call spend time on the move chosen, and the other one I call the ABC error. All right, let's define what the first one is. The first one is spend time on the move chosen. When you're playing a slower game, you want to look at multiple candidate moves. You want to check to see if they're safe. You want to compare them, and you want to play the best one that you can in a reasonable amount of time. That's not quite the same way you play speed games. When you have short time control games, you kind of have to look at a move, see if it's reasonable, do a quick check to see if you can see anything that's clearly better. If you can't, you just play your move. But that's not really how you get to be better in long time control games. And I've mentioned in several videos, if you're one of those people that started playing after the Queen's Gambit, or you started playing more seriously, or you just started playing online during the pandemic, and you think that a 15-minute game is a slow game, well, if the game goes 40 moves, 15 times 60 seconds is 900 seconds, divided by 40 is like 22 and a half. You only have 22 and a half seconds for a move. That's not enough to even check to see if your moves are safe usually, much less check to see if multiple moves are safe, much less check to see if multiple moves are safe, and then compare what's going to happen after each one to try to see which one's the best. So if you want to get to be a good slow player, if you want to be an expert or a master, these things are given out for long time control games. You want to play games that are long enough that you can really think about things. And when you do think about things, one of the main things you want to think about is the move that you're actually going to play. Now, this may seem ridiculous. You may say, well, what else are you thinking about? And the answer is when I teach a lot of my students and they make mistakes, one of the mistakes that pops up occasionally, too much probably, is they're playing a long time control game and they have a bunch of things they can do, and they get infatuated with one or more things and they really look at those things, and then when they realize that those things don't work, they kind of default to some other move. And when they default to the other move they default to turns out that they don't give it enough thought. So what I tell people is, in order to avoid this error of not thinking enough about the move that you're going to play, you probably want to spend at least 15% of your time actually looking at the move that you are going to play and see, what can my opponent do? What are his checks, captures, and threats after I make that move? So if you're looking at moves A, B, C, and D as being different moves that you could play, or maybe I could call them A prime, A double prime, A triple prime, whatever. If you're looking at 4 different moves and you're spending a lot of time on the first 3, and then eventually you're going to play the 4th one, you want to spend at least 15% of your time saying, if I make this 4th move, what would the board look like, and what would he do to me, and what am I going to do about it? 15% seems reasonable. So if you spend 4 minutes, that's 240 seconds. 15% of 240 is 36. You want to spend about 36 seconds minimum looking at the move that you're actually going to end up playing and seeing if it's safe. If at the last second you switch to something else, well, then you're going to have to spend another 15% of that time looking to see if that move is safe. So let's take a real simple example here. Let's say you're playing this game here in a French, and it's White's turn, and White says, wow, I was taught that when black castle's in a French, very often I can play this classical bishop sacrifice. Bishop takes h7 check. I wonder if I can here. And you start calculating bishop h7 check, then if he takes the bishop, then you can play knight g5 check. If he moves the king, maybe you can bring your queen up to h5. But what happens if he takes the knight? Bishop takes g5. Well, maybe you have queen h5 check anyway, and maybe you get a good attack. And let's say you start analyzing that, and then you realize, wait a second, this just doesn't work at all. This is not a good move. And you say, all right, I'll just develop my pieces then. I need to get out my bishop and my queen, then get my rooks over. I'll just play queen to e2. All right, that's the example of a spend time on the move chosen error, because what happens if black now plays c4 and hits the bishop? Well, the queen move you just played takes away the bishop's only retreat square, And now your only move is to play bishop h7, but you've already calculated that that doesn't work, and you're just going to end up pretty much losing the bishop. So when you rejected bishop takes h7 check, no matter how much time you spend on that move, whichever move you decide to play instead, you have to reanalyze the move that you're going to play. You can't just play it as a, quote, safe move because the move that you looked at didn't work. If you do play queen e2 here, well, not quickly, but if you play queen e2 without additional thought, after spending a lot of time looking at bishop h7 and your opponent traps your bishop, as I said, that I call that the spend time on the move chosen idea. You didn't spend time on the move you actually were going to play. Think of it from your opponent's point of view. Does your opponent know you're thinking about bishop takes h7 check? Well, he might, but he really doesn't know what you're going to play. People are always saying, oh, I thought on my opponent's time, that's why I played fast. And that's not a good idea. You know, when you're thinking on your opponent's time, you don't know what he's going to do. Well, certainly black had no idea that white was going to play queen e2. It's actually a bad move. Why would he think you're going to play that? But once you do play that, black's not going to spend any of his time pretty much looking much at bishop h7 check, because that's not what you played. He's going to look at queen e2 and say, well, now that you've played queen e2, what can I do? Well, he's going to spend 100% of his effort trying to find a good move that might beat queen e2. You have to have spent at least some of your effort during your time thinking to make sure that he's going to fail. You want to make sure that when you make a move and your opponent has 100% knowledge of what you did, that no matter what he does, you're going to be able to stop what he does. The only way you can do that is to spend time on the move chosen before you make that move. No matter how much time you spend looking at other moves, you have to spend time on the move you're actually going to choose, because your opponent's going to spend 100% of his effort on that move, because that's the only move he's going to see. He doesn't care how much time you spent on all of those other moves you didn't play. The one he's interested in is the one that you did play. So that's got to be a lot of your interest as well. So I call that spend time on the move chosen. And we could go through more and more examples. Let's talk about a similar problem, which I call the ABC problem. Now here, ABC refers to your move, your opponent's reply, and your next move. So A is your current move, B is what your opponent would play after your move, and C is your next move. So you're looking and you're analyzing ABC. You're saying, gee, if I do A and he does B, I bet I can do C. All right, well, that's how you think a lot of times. But if you do A and he does B and you immediately do C because either, number one, you were thinking about it on the previous move and you analyzed A, B, C, or secondly, if you played A and while he was thinking, you say, aha, if he does B, I'm going to do C. Either way, if you do C quickly, I call that the ABC error. The ABC error is where you make a move A, which may be very reasonable, your opponent makes a dangerous reply B, and you make a move C that you've already calculated, either based on your previous move or on while your opponent was thinking. If you make that move quickly and you're not in time trouble, and it turns out to be a really bad move, I call that the ABC error. Well, what should you do to avoid the ABC error? What you should have done is you should have analyzed, if I do A and he does B, I can do C. And then when you play A and he finally does do B, the first thing you should do is reanalyze C. Reanalyze that move and say, is it really as good as I thought it was when I made move A? Because when you made move A, the only thing you were committing yourself to was move A. You weren't committing move C. That hasn't been played yet. If it is indeed as good as you thought it was, let's say it's good and it justifies your move A, but it doesn't win the game. It just, makes move A okay because you have this move C. Then what you do is you put move C in your pocket and you say, all right, I predicted I could play move C, but now that I found move C, let's make it my king of the hill, my best move I found so far, and let's look for a better move. Now, if C wins the game completely, if C is checkmate in 1, or if C puts you up 9 pawns or something, well, of course you don't have to do that. But you still need to reanalyze it. If it wins the game easily, well, then play it. Check it a few times, of course, before you do that, because if it wins the game easily, you don't need to play fast to show everybody how smart you are. Take your time. When you see a move that wins, don't play it. Make sure it really wins, Because if you play it fast and it turns out you were wrong, you could be throwing away the whole game. And I've seen so many people do that. They want to play fast and show everybody how smart they are. They play move C right away. Bad idea. So if C wins the game, okay, you can play it. If C doesn't win the game, put it in your pocket, look for a better move. If you don't do those things, I call it the ABC error, because it may be that your move A was perfectly good and his move B was a reasonable reply, and now you had some move other than C that would be quite okay, but because you looked at C on the previous move, you play it right away, don't reanalyze it, and turns out it's faulty, and C is the move that costs you the game, the ABC error. I have a game where I think this occurred. Let's take a look here. It's number 345 in my library. Examine Dan video %345. All right, so let's take a look at this game. All right, we've got a Nimzo Indian, Queen C2 classical variation, Castle, A3, Bishop E7. Now if white wants, he could play E4. He plays Bishop G5, but that's kind of a pseudo pin. The bishop's already gone back to E7, so I would have played E4 in that position, not Bishop G5. C6 getting ready to play D5. Again, if white wants, he can play E4. He plays E3, kind of slow playing it. Now black pretty much is getting into a kind of position he would get into in a Queen's Gambit declined if he plays D5. Plays H6 first. Now he plays D5. Bishop D3. A lot of times when people play Bishop D3, you take the pawn, and then you either hit the bishop with a pawn, like in the Moran variation of the Slav, or you play for a break move with C5. Black plays knight BD7 first, knight F3. Now I'm pretty sure pawn takes pawn is a good move. Rook E8, castle, pawn takes, bishop takes. There's that B5. Bishop back D3. Now black could play A6 followed by C5, or he could play bishop to B7. Plays A6. Rook A D1. Probably makes more sense here to put the rook on the semi-open file to fight against C5 and put the other rook on D1. Queen B6. Knight E4. Now we have to start looking for capturing sequences, counting issues. Bishop B7. Now he decides, oops, maybe I should have had the rook on the semi-open file to play against the break move. He could also here play B4 to stop that break, and then black would break that pawn with A5. So if white plays B4, A5 would be a good move. Rook C1, rook A C8, B4 trying to stop him. Again, black pretty much has to play A5 here and start pressuring this pawn. And he wants to isolate that pawn and pressure it. Good move by black. White says, I'm going to block you in. Black takes, white takes. Black takes on C5. Not sure about that. White takes that way. Now black's in a little bit of trouble. His last couple moves were not probably the most accurate. He plays Queen D8. And now white says, ooh, open file. I can put a rook on the same file with the queen. He does. Now black's got to find a way to make sure bishop checks doesn't win his queen. Black says, I'll block it. Okay, so it's white's turn here. Black is now threatening bishop takes H4. He's got the bishop attack twice. So white has to do something about it. He could trade the bishops, or he could play the bishop back to G3. He could even play some tricky stuff as well. He plays bishop checks first. So his plan here is to play bishop checks, and then if black gets out of check, he wants to play knight E5, winning the knight. And if black tries to play bishop takes H4, he can play rook takes D7, and the queen is kind of trapped. Let's take a look at what that looks like. Bishop checks, let's say king H8. Probably black should play king F8, but knight E5. If bishop takes H4, rook takes. And now the rook is double attacking the bishop and the queen. If the queen comes up to play like queen F6 to save the queen, then knight F7 check's going to win the queen, because the only legal move is queen takes, rook takes. So black can't play bishop takes H4 on that line. So that's what white is planning. That's his ABC. His A is bishop H7 check. His B is if black plays king h8, I will play knight e5. Okay, so white plays bishop h7 check. Now black should avoid a lot of that, and he should play king to f8. Black here needs to look ahead and see that white's got some threats, and he wants to keep that f7 pawn guarded. Black plays king h8, and white goes, oh goody, I have knight e5, and his position is falling apart. So he plays knight e5. Well, if you play this move too quickly, then that's what I would call an ABC error, because you have much better moves than knight e5. Even though knight e5 is super attractive, you've got the knight pinned to the queen, and you could threaten to take it, and you've got all kinds of checks and threats on the bishop. The better move here, if white had taken his time, would be to play rook takes d7 right away. This move order changing from, we did ABC, and then DEF. We really want to do AB, E, and then if he does D, do C. The other way around, because now if black plays queen takes, the game's over. Knight e5 has a double threat. It threatens the queen, and it threatens knight takes f7 checkmate. And there's no defense. That's why black should have played king f8. So this is very cute. After knight e5, black can just resign. I mean, if he plays bishop takes h4, then knight takes d7, game over. White's up a queen for a rook with no problems at all. In fact, look at this terrible bishop here. The only way this bishop on b7 can get back to the game is to play bishop c8 and then play e5 and try to get the bishop back that way. So this is also a good example of not only the ABC error, but when you see a good move, look for a better one. Well, after bishop checks, king h8 question mark, knight e5 is a good move. It'll win material, but rook takes d7 is much more accurate. Let's see how the game continued. Knight e5, and now black realizes if he takes the bishop, he's going to get murdered on rook takes d7. In fact, if he takes the bishop, knight takes f7 is just mate right away. I should have said that before. All right, so he can't take there. The threat is mate. So what could black do? Well, it looks like black's going to lose a whole ton of material, but actually black is only going to end up losing a little bit. He correctly says, I'll sack the queen and take your knight. This is by far his best move. This is a move that white didn't expect at all. He said, oh, he can't do that. I'll win his queen. But black's getting a rook and a piece for the queen, and a rook and a piece for the queen is pretty good. So he takes the queen. Black does not have time to take the bishop. So black has to take back. He takes with the rook. And now the bishop is attacked. If white wants, he can attack the knight. The knight would probably go into this nice c4 square. White trades off. Black takes, and now black's threatening g6, trapping the bishop. White plays bishop e4. White has the much better bishop, but black has control of the file right now, so white's much better here, but it's still a game. If white had played it the other way and not made the ABC error, then white would be just winning easily. The game would be over by now. So black doubles his rooks, making white keep an eye on the back rank. White should move up a pawn here to create luft. He does. Black hits the queen. Queen goes up, knight c4. So you can see black's pieces are pretty active. He's getting some play. White says, please, let's trade off some rooks and get some things off the board. Black says, no thanks. He checks. Black hits the bishop. Bishop comes back, hits the rook. Rook hits the queen. Queen goes d1, so the rooks are very well placed for black. White still has some material advantage, but if black didn't have this terrible bishop here, he would be doing much better. If he can get that bishop in the game somehow with maybe, e5 and bishop c8, bishop e6, well, then he's really got something going. So he plays rook to b3, hitting the pawn on b4. White says, you can take that pawn, but I'm going to get rid of your annoying knight. Can't take the pawn right away, of course, because the queen's on it. So black just waits with king up. And now white says, oh, I can play bishop takes, pawn takes, rook takes, and guard the pawn that way. All right, is that his best move? Well, not really, because it lets the bishop out. The bishop can come out to a6. So if we ask Stockfish what white should do here, Stockfish 13. Stockfish 13 says white should just grab the A file and go down and threaten, harass the bishop, and play around the knight. And if he does, he's up 4.5. Watch what happens to white's advantage when he tries to win the pawn, because it solves black's biggest problem. Bishop takes. You just saw it drop down a pawn and a half. Pawn takes, and now Stockfish says white should play queen a1, and again, try to keep this bishop at bay. White just takes the pawn, and now you can see the numbers dropping and dropping. Now white's advantage is all the way down to 1.2. So 2 moves ago, sorry, let me go forward real fast here. Let's do forward 50. Okay. All right, get back to the same position. Here we are. So if we look at the Stockfish says that here, well, it's black's move. It says black should play rook a3. Black played king h7. It says white should play something like e4 with some tactical tricks. If he takes, you can move the bishop and take the pawn check. He's up by about 5 pawns. When he plays there, his lead drops to about 3 pawns. And when he takes there, his lead drops down to less than 1.5 pawns. Well, now it's back up around 2. Now it's back to 1.2. Yeah, and so black's pieces are getting much more active here. Black hits the rook. White says, would you like to trade? Black says, no thank you. The engine said if black would have traded here and just created a fortress with bishop c4, guarding the rook and then guarding all the pawns and they can't get the bishop off, the white would no longer be winning at all. So black's plan to keep the rooks on the board actually is not a great plan. All right, here again, white should play queen a1, keeping an eye on g7 and a6. The queen can hit g7 with rook d7. He's hitting a6 right away with tactics. He hits the rook. The rook just takes the pawn. Now white should abandon that and go after the kingside attack. White instead trades. White has good winning chances in the endgame. Keeps hitting those pawns. Tries to bring the king up. Says white's advantage is pretty much gone. He's down to 0.5. He hits the rook. That lets the bishop go on the diagonal. Now white's getting into some real problems with this potential king safety issue. Stockfish says rook b1 is equal. Rook c4 going after the pawn. Queen a5, rook c2 hitting this pawn. If white tries to guard it, his queen's all tied up. Equal game. White plays queen b4. Now the engine says black's completely winning on rook takes f2, which he plays. Now he's got all kinds of threats. He's got threats to play g5, g4 check, king h4, rook takes checkmate. He's got threats to play bishop f3 and bishop checks followed by rook checkmates. He's got a whole bunch of unstoppable threats. White plays queen there. That does pin this pawn, but unfortunately for him, there's going to be a mate coming up after bishop checks, king h4, and then bishop f1 threatening rook takes h2 mate. Black doesn't see that, plays rook e2, still good enough to win. Queen c7, rook takes e3, queen f4, rook to the 7th. White says, I don't have anything to do. Black says, I'll check you now. And now, if king to h5, then bishop f3, pawn in the way. Black could take with the bishop or with the rook, and he's winning. White just throws the pawn in the way. Black takes it. White plays up. Now black should go for the discovered attack here. He just moves the rook out of the way. The threat is bishop f3 checkmate. White tries to stop it with queen there. Black says, I can do that anyway, because I've got this cute g3 mate. Queen takes, and pawn up mate. So if we go back to that position where white jumped on that knight e5 move, knight e5 is a good looking move and it should win the game, but he has better moves. Bishop checks, king h8 question mark. Rook takes wins. Knight e5. Yes, if white plays perfectly here, let's play knight e5 and play it perfectly. Knight e5, knight takes e5 is forced. Rook takes d8. He played rook c d8. Bishop e7. And now Stockfish says play bishop e4 to tie down his pieces guarding there. So far, so great. Rook there. Now just create luft with h3. Notice, better to create luft with h3, which is the opposite color of the bishop, even though the bishop can't do anything on those squares. White plays g3, which should be good enough to win. All this should be good enough to win, and now Stockfish again says h3. He's still holding on. Queen e1. I think queen a1 with the idea of harassing that bishop is the right idea, but still queen e1 should win. Rook here, and again grab the a file. Bishop e2. And this is where white said, well, if he doesn't do anything, I can win a pawn here. Well, okay, that's true, but is that good? It lets the bishop out. And now white's really starting to throw things away. And you saw later what happened. In this position, white has all these weak white squares around his king, and black has the only light square bishop on the board, and once he gets into those lines, then black gets all kinds of tactics. Well, white still has a lead of 1.5 here, but things are getting more and more dangerous. And, you know, we're not going to play out the whole rest of the game again, but we see the seeds of how white threw the game away. And it all started with this kind of ABC error where he played A, black played the wrong B, and he said, wow, I've got C. And it's true, C is a good move, but there are better ones that would just win the game, and he ended up losing the game. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed today's video on spend time on the move chosen, plus the ABC error. If you liked the video, you can hit the like button, you can subscribe, but the best thing you can do is tell your friends about my channel, Dan Heisman Chess. We've got 180 plus videos on help you playing chess better, even if I can't say that last sentence. Okay, have a great time. We'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.